Welcome everyone to this episode, this Town Hall 28, which is, well,
28.
it's a lot of town halls. We've pushed through, and I'm thankful that people keep attending. So let's move on to the next one here. We've got our our sponsors here. We'd like to welcome CUNA National Association, and I think I'm allowed to announce now that I will be the virtual MC / host for the CUNA Tech and Ops. So I'll be, I'm not even sure how that's going to work, but hey, what the heck, I'll try it. Plus now I got all these fancy filters I can use in Zoom. So
Well done, sir.
yeah. So we're going to create an AI version of me before then and just let it run it.
An avatar.
But so I'll be running that. And then, so we're thankful to have CUNA, and we know they're going to really get on board here. They were very excited about being a sponsor, so we're happy to have them. Member Pass, for those of you that didn't see the news today, and Ron, you might have saw that. Did you see that Citi and was it Wells or who was it? I just was looking at it. It was
Wells Fargo.
Yeah, it was Wells Fargo. Citi and Wells both invested in the digital ID space today. And it's interesting that they went together. It was a $35 million funding round for machine learning based digital identity. Company's called Socure. So
Yep.
that just tells you, and Member Pass is really the only fully credit union owned digital identity solution. And it's getting hotter as COVID goes on, and there's a big opportunity there. Obviously, my group, Best Innovation Group, and as always, the one, the only, the man with the microphone and the monopoly, the large monopoly pieces there, Mike.
We aim high for Boardwalk. Only
Yeah,
the
for
best.
Boardwalk, yeah. you got to roll the right thing to land on Boardwalk. So let's move on to next. So thanks to all the sponsors. And of course, there's introducing real fast. Most of you know us. My name is John Best. I'm the CEO of Best Innovation Group. I also speak frequently at many events. And meet Mike Lawson, who I've known for many, many years of CU Broadcast and way back before you ever had a television show.
That's right.
So, and when we put this together, he was willing to come on and help me out. And so I'm so thankful for that. So let's get to the main act, the headliner, the one, the only, the Snarkington, so many different things that we could call him. I've known Ron for a while. Ron, I remember sitting backstage with you at several events and just being blown away by all you brought to that, working with Cornerstone for years. Ron is a frequent speaker. He's a truth sayer, so don't be ready, because he's not going to let you slide out there. He's the author of the book Smarter Bank, but that's not my favorite book. My favorite book is your Snarketing 2.0. I think is how I'm supposed to say it, right?
Mine too.
That is an awesome book. If you haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. He writes the FinTech Snark Tank for Forbes, which is I'm there at least once or twice a week. I usually try to roll through it, and was kind enough to join us today. So we're very thankful to have Ron with us, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Before we go, let's just put a little guidelines around things. So the town hall format is just a short briefing, which we're going through now. We need everybody to sign in to let us know who you are. We don't want to be Zoom bombed. So if we don't know who you are, if you don't sign in, then we're likely going to dump you out of there. If you feel compelled to dig deeper within another credit union or us, we encourage you to use the chat feature. If we see something in the chat, we will pop that in and talk about it. If there's an issue that needs further discussion from anyone else, we'll push that to be something that Mike will take care of on his show. And these are recorded, and they're published out into CU Broadcast, as well as onto the Big FinTech site. And we also send them just directly to China to skip the middleman. We ship them right out from here. So if there's something that you don't want the Chinese to know or us, it'd be good for you to either not talk about it on the show, or to go ahead and let us know afterwards that you'd like to have that edited out if you'd still like to share. So we appreciate everyone's being candid, their candor, and we're thankful for the good discussion that we have here. I think that's why everybody keeps coming back. So let's move on. I think you know where the chat is, but Ron, this is such an interesting thing of we've done this for so long that when we first did it, people were such Zoom newbies that we had to tell them where chat was. Now they're like all old hat, like, why are you showing us this? But people are starting to really figure it out. By the way, I did notice something today, and I'll go ahead and share it here real fast. It turns out that the new Zoom has some new features. I don't know if you've seen this.
Oh, that's nice, John.
Yep.
Good look for
Or
you.
this. This is going to be for my Black Hat presentation coming up.
The
when
latest
you-
Fraudster episode. Nice.
Yeah, the latest Fraudster. And then there's, of course, Credit Union Pirates, which I'm working on. So it updated today.
I've
And
never installed it. But
it was a brand new thing. So if you're interested and you want to wear a hat during a meeting, seems like a business thing to do. Certainly, I would highly recommend it. So that said, let's get to it here. So Ron, I asked you on the show, and the thing that I really thought was interesting, and this is a continuing theme throughout this show, or the town hall here, is this idea that digital transformation has been achieved, pushed. Check out Brian Lade, and he looks at that's not a. Turns out that's not one of those little icons. That's his actual hat. I thought it was one of the fakey things. So
Look at that.
yeah, there you go. But that said, you wrote an article talking about the digital transformation and what true digital transformation was. Let's start there, because I think that's really important for everyone to hear. So maybe give us a little background on that, and we'll jump in and have some questions.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, John. Appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts and ideas around this. You know, what kind of spurred me was I had been seeing a series of articles published all over the place talking about how the COVID crisis was accelerating digital transformation within the banking industry. And as I actually kind of struck me as being wrong right from the start, of course, because I'm just, natural contrarian and all that kind of stuff. But, the arguments for why there was this acceleration, really wasn't adding up. People were saying things like, ooh, look, 25% of consumers say that they'll make less use of the branches. Well, first of all, that's hardly a very big percentage. And second of all, who said that they were making a lot of uses of the branches beforehand? We're seeing things like, COVID crisis is accelerating the development of personalized products and services. And I was like, no, it isn't. It takes a long time to develop personalized products and services, and I was getting into these arguments with my buddy Jim Marous, who publishes, financial brand and digital banking reporting. Going, oh, look at all this, usage of all these people. I'm like, that's adoption. That's not transformation. We really need to make a distinction between transformation and evolution or adoption. Now, John, you just asked me, what is true transformation? And I got to tell you, I'm very loath to try to even answer that. And the reason is because, having been a consultant for more than 30 years now, here's what I've kind of learned. You can't dictate a definition of something for business executives. And in fact, there was a book that was written back, I think in the 90s, by a couple of Harvard guys, and it was called Beyond the Hype. And what they did was they looked at trends in like management consulting trends, things like knowledge management and business reengineering. And, one of the things that they concluded was that the reason certain of these trends took off in the consulting world and in the business world was because it opened up enough room for executives to define it the way they wanted it to define it, that made sense for their own organization. So I don't think you can legislate or dictate a definition of digital transformation. I think it is dependent on, on each organization to define what it means for them and go off and do it. But having said all that, I had conducted a survey last year in a study that actually never got published. And I asked, I surveyed about 100 credit union executives and asked them, here's a bunch of definitions of potential definitions for digital transformation. Which one of these best resonates with you? And the one that, talked about fundamental change in operations and value delivery was the definition that resonated best with the largest percentage of respondents. And when I look at what's going on now, I don't really see that fundamental change, certainly not in operations, but even more so, definitely not in delivery of value delivery. So to me,
so
it's just
can I
very much
read
evolution.
that quote? Could I read? I liked it. It was like a mission statement. It said integration of digital technologies into all areas, fundamentally changing how to operate and deliver value. And this was the best one to me, a culture
Oh, okay.
change that continually challenges the
Okay.
status quo and gets comfortable with failure. I mean, wow, that's like a
That's fine.
somebody's let me move somebody on the mute, but yeah, that was a mouthful, but it felt like one of those, everybody gets in a room and there's some guy with giant posties on every wall and everybody has to yak, and eventually we distill it down to this t-shirt size message or whatever. But I mean, I thought that was actually, to me, that felt like a really good definition. It was sort of the eye opener of the article for me to go, oh, that is what digital transformation, at least in my mind, should be at a broad scale.
Well, I got to tell you, looking back on it, I feel like it just threw too many things into the kitchen sink. Change of operations, culture change, failure. It just felt like I was just throwing.
You did
too
miss
many
cryptography.
things.
You did miss, cryptocurrency. So
Yeah, right. Yeah.
that should have been in there. But I think that so if you're looking at the organizations that are out there that are sort of going, oh my gosh, we had to push so hard, and kind of looking at work from home as a status that isn't going to change, it's kind of here to stay. But is that a true culture shift when it's forced upon you like that? Is that kind of your concept there? It's not really a culture shift if it's sort of forced on you.
Yeah, it's not a culture shift. It's a legitimate reaction to current environment. But I think there's a lot of folks within the industry who, whether they would verbalize this or not, kind of feel like, well, I hope we can get back to normal sometime soon. Let's get back. And normal isn't just not working from home. Normal is, and I think this is the key part, John. I really think it's the normal in their mind is we build relationships with our members through face-to-face interactions in physical presences like the branch. That's to me is the cultural change or the mindset that until that changes, we don't really see digital transformation. If I can share a quick story. Back in the early 2000s, there was an American Banker article that ran highlighting Vernon Hill, who was the founder and CEO for a while of Commerce Bank in the Philadelphia, South Jersey area. And Vernon is a character for sure. And, he kind of got into some legal trouble, went to the UK, created Metro Bank, and got into further legal trouble. But
as all good execs do.
The story about Vernon Hill was that he got out of business school, and unlike a lot of his business school compatriots, instead of getting jobs with big companies, he got a job with McDonald's. And legend has it that his job was to drive Ray Kroc around to scout out locations for new McDonald's. But his mindset, what he began to learn was about process excellence and process, consistency. That's what McDonald's was all about. And although Hill was not a banker, his thought was, the banking industry is lacking this process consistency. I can bring this to banking, and brought that to what was then, of course, a very branch-centric, type of world. Now, fast forward to the early 2000s, online banking was really becoming, certainly on its upswing. Mobile banking was in its infancy, but, American Banker asked Vernon why Commerce Bank was not making big investments in online banking. And I'll never forget what Vernon's response was. He said, because nobody wants a relationship with a computer. And I wished for this, close to 20 years now, wish I had an opportunity to respond to Vernon so that I can say, yeah, but nobody wants a relationship with a brick. Not about the branch. It's not about the brick and mortar that people have a relationship. It's the relationship they have with your people. And John, it's 2020. Look how we are interacting here through technology, and we're face to face and we're talking with each other. There are better ways, more economical, faster, efficient, effective ways of communicating face to face, people to people, than putting everybody in a branch and forcing people to get up off their chairs and go drive down somewhere to have these conversations. What the industry is missing, not just and it is a mindset, but it's just a recognition that there is technology to enable this face-to-face, person-to-person communication. And I don't see that mindset changing very rapidly in the minds of senior executives in the credit union world.
So what you're saying is, and it's an interesting concept, is they're hoping there's this elasticity to this, that it will snap back like a bungee cord, and soon we'll get back to this new normal, and all they have to do is sort of endure these changes for a certain amount of time, and then that world will come back to the way it was. When that's one of the fundamental things we talk about on this town hall pretty frequently, is what's here to stay. As a matter of fact, my friend Brian, Hat Guy, he calls them, I think, super trends, right, Brian? That's your name for them, is the idea of what's going to be a trend that, you know, supersedes the virus and continues to change, right? And so from your perspective, what you're saying is that, are you saying we should use this opportunity to hurl ourselves, to take, it's kind of like, hey, you were forced to, I was forced to lay sod in the lawn and do it for 4 days, and I kind of got a little kind of in shape. Now maybe I should run with that, go to the gym or something, or do I snap back and get back to my Oreos because I love them Oreos? So, you know, how do you play that game? Or are you suggesting that it's that the environment's not going to, or maybe both, not going to snap back like a bungee cord, and that if you're still holding on to that, it's a recipe for failure?
So it depends on where you're coming from in this mindset shift and focus on digital transformation. If you're a credit union executive who believes that you need more, better, whatever, deeper digital transformation, then I think absolutely using this crisis as a trigger or a change point is a great organizational tool to do this. Rally around it. What I had written in the article, if I can just reference a few of the things, is that,
yeah, please.
So trying to stay away from what the definition of digital transformation was, I kind of try to put a stake in the ground and say, here's when we'll know we had digital transformation. And the last one kind of refers a little bit to what you were kind of talking about, is that, I believe that we'll need more shocks to the system. We'll need more triggers, because we get complacent and things get well. I remember 15 years ago, things weren't that, things were going pretty well for a lot of banks and credit unions in the early 2000s, pre-financial crisis, and you couldn't get them to change anything the way they did anything. And then 2007, 2008 hit, and then, okay, look at this, we got to change. Well, similar thing now, we were riding fat and happy for the past couple of years, other than, we were struggling with some deposit gathering, but that, that was not, significant. Now we're looking at, zero net interest margins. We're, the funny thing is, so now we're fat and happy with deposits, but everything else is, gone.
Yeah, we can't make a loan to save our
So,
life.
I think, to really kind of get to this state of where we're have truly reached digital transformation. I don't even know that's the right way to think about it. I don't think it's this black or white kind of thing. But
Yeah, it's certainly not a destination.
No, definitely not a destination, and not a point where you can say, yes, we have achieved it, yes or no. But, at some point where, we're over the hump of this, and I don't think we're at the hump of, having gotten over, the tipping point, I guess, whatever. But, I think there's some other things that, are going to be required to really achieve this idea of digital transformation. And one of them is legacy system overhaul. It amazes me that so many people will say, oh, yes, we've accelerated digital transformation. Look, I don't think we've accelerated digital transformation until we've accelerated legacy overhaul and transformation. And I just want to put a caveat on that, because I know that there are a lot of folks out there who are putting out some really good tools to sit on top of the legacy environment to enable integration and communication and process efficiency. And I don't want to belittle that at all. But until we're really see some more extensive legacy transformation, the industry is not anywhere closer to digital transformation. The second area I think is around AI. We hear so much about how AI and machine learning and all these AI-based type tools is going to transform banking. It's going to transform banking. Look, reality is that a lot of these tools are simply not very mature in the maturation scale. Many require a lot more data than we have available to really feed these kinds of systems. So until we're at a much greater degree of AI maturity from a deployment perspective, the industry has not achieved digital transformation. And then the last thing, and the one where I would expect to get the most slings and arrows from people, is I don't think we've really achieved digital transformation in the industry until we've seen the next generation of leaders take over. And, look, granted, I'm an old guy, and I take offense of that as well. And I'm trying to hang on here and prove my, legitimacy and relevance and all of that. But John, I've been there before in my career. I started out as a consultant in the mid 80s when, client server technology was becoming big and PCs were emerging. And it was the same thing then. We weren't going to see widespread adoption and legitimization of personal computing in organizations until those pre-baby boomers got out of the executive suites. And now, funny, 35 years later, it's, ain't going to happen until the baby boomers are out of the executive suite. Even though, look, granted, there are plenty of baby boomer executives who kind of get it. But at the large scale, industry-wide level, I don't think we see digital transformation until the Gen Xers and older millennials take over.
It's funny you say that. I once had a CEO, we were trying to install, of all things, voicemail. And I might as well have been trying to install, I don't know, Voodoo. He legitimately told me that no one would ever answer the phone again. And I said, well, we'll fire him. And he said, well, it's going to be everybody. There'll be nobody here. He legit thought that people would just go, hi, I got this voicemail thing. I'm never picking that up again. And, lo and behold, it turned out to be a big deal back in the mid 90s. If you remember, voicemail was a great thing. You didn't, and then of course, when we rolled it out, we had to do it in the, Joe could use voicemail, but then when Joe's out, Steve needs it. So I spent 2 years rolling out voicemail one at a time by some sort of form that had to be filled out and then approved by the CEO and a deity. So, that's,
so John,
that's
you're getting
at to defeat.
You're getting at another cultural thing. That's you really want to get sensitive here on this call. Let's go there.
Let's do it, man. Let's go.
So
I want to see Tom throw something at the screen right there. So let's anger him.
Why was it such a big problem with voicemail? Well, of course, it's part of the problem is what's the ROI on this? But the underlying problem was, look, if we give voicemail to everybody, then we don't need a whole slew of assistants taking phone calls for people.
Sure.
And look, the credit union industry, to its credit, does not like to fire people.
No, we're a family style organization.
And I simply don't know how to reconcile that because it's a big component of the cost structure. And the only way you're going to be able to continue to validate or compensate for that is if there's huge revenue, top line growth for that. And so, we got a problem in the industry in terms of that cultural thing. And I'm not saying that needs to change or shift. Yes, I'd like to see the technology mindset change. I certainly would never advocate for the human compassion and family feel part to change. I think that's key to it. But it is a barrier to change that simply has to either be acknowledged or dealt with.
Well, this is a good point to jump in with some. As I told you, this is a very interactive group, and Tom knows I'm coming to him. So, Tom, introduce yourself. So, Tom, you may know Tom. You probably run into him at least somewhere. but Tom runs a credit union that's already kind of moving in that digital space. But Tom, you've been around a while. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm pretty much shaking my head, agreeing with everything Ron is saying.
So you fired all the assistants. You're the only one that works there, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Aspire, we went from branch to branchless. We've been digital delivery for a long time. We need to constantly up our game in the quality of the products, but everything is digitally delivered. When this all COVID hit, it was not an issue for us because nobody comes to our offices anyway. And if credit unions really look at their branches, they're not getting profitable members into their branches. It seems that the CEOs I've spoken to through this are figuring out how to prep their branch for the member onslaught that they're going to get, and as it's going to be members pulling these CEOs kicking and screaming into the future.
So they're prepping for like, oh gosh, when we can finally open the doors, it's going to be Katie bar the door, like lines around the whole place.
And I'm saying continue to retrain your members to do things remotely, lower cost, more convenient, and get rid of the branch, jettison it, And for us, it worked. I mean, we did this several years ago. Changing the core was a huge part of it because of the open APIs and older systems. And some people are still swearing by their old systems, and they don't get it. They don't get it.
But
and it's
Tom,
going to be revolutionary. It's going to be
not evolutionary.
It's going to be a big calamity like this that forces people to cooperate with each other and consolidate and fire people and streamline.
But Tom, I know you, and I know you well enough to know that if I said, hey, I can replace your entire, insert department here with Ron Shevlin's new, oinkity boink bot, I know you well enough to know your first instinct isn't to let all those people go because that's a lot of talent. So is there another answer? Is there a retrain these people, or what's the next best thing for them to do if they weren't doing this?
Well, I think part of it is that too. It's like, okay, what's the new role that we need, and how do we help people get there? We want to be empathetic. We can't be sympathetic. It's a business. Our member is first. So how do we help our staff shift? I mean, when we went through these changes, we put a lot of people on a sales team. We made them sales consultants to be that human interaction to help people get the right loan, to get the right savings product or investment product, not just to punch numbers into a widget. I mean, we're looking at process automation now to further improve the service we give, and we do want to consider the human element and the staff element. But we're not here to employ people. It's hard to say, for people to hear. We're here to improve the lives of our members. Our mission statements are all about member-driven. How do we help our staff to do that and do it better? And add more value.
But Ron, you're saying, and I could be wrong, but the gains from the FTE, the reduction in FTE has to, and I think Tom's trying to balance that, and rightly so, but you're saying, hey, like for example, I'm gonna maybe throw this at Andrew Bertrand. Andrew would be someone who has to implement this technology and often knows he's displacing people. Andrew, by the way, introduce yourself and let him know where you're from.
Hey, I'm Andrew Bertrand, Chief Information Officer at Our Community Credit Union. We're a rural credit union in Shelton, Washington, kind of far away from everything.
They have 6 members, one of which is Andrew. No, I'm just kidding. They're really great, forward-thinking,
really wealthy members. Right?
Yeah, right.
Well, it's the lottery Powerball winners credit union, so they're 10 billion. So, go ahead.
So remind me what the question was.
The question was, Andrew, as someone who implements this technology and often sees the credit union, because I was in that spot and right, Kevin was there with me. We were implementing new systems that we knew which should displace jobs, but I never saw it happen. To Ron's point, I have to be, he said, be honest. I'm being honest. I was always kind of like, hey, maybe that lady will retire and stop, calling me every time, the computer looks weird at her or whatever. But that never happened, mostly because Kevin, kept giving her raises or whatever. But, I'm sure you run into that in your organization. You guys are, in a constant state of sort of that momentum.
Yeah, and we've had a lot of changes within the last 6 years, really. And a lot of that, I mean, kind of on Ron's point, we didn't fire anybody. just to get rid of them. You know, we always value like the community and the people here and our, you know, the family. But we did have some senior positions that retired. And after that retirement happened, change came quick in those departments in those areas. So we really, it's a balance. You know, it's kind of like when COVID hit, we didn't want to let anybody go. Our focus was keeping jobs, so we converted in the call center. You know, just other ways that you can still interact with the membership, because you still need that personal one-on-one. And it's hard to lose, you know, 30 years of experience if somebody has that way of talking to that member.
So Ron,
John,
in your mind, is that the good mindset?
you know, given Andrew's comments, you know, it's helped me see things a little bit differently. Let me.
Oh my gosh, you changed
know.
his Stark man's mind.
I'm not saying I'm wrong.
Oh, okay, okay.
But
I was going to write it down. I was excited.
here's where I think the challenge for a lot of credit unions is that, yes, there is that reluctancy to let people go. But I think as you kind of look at, you know, if you think about this as a period of transition in terms of fundamentally how we deliver services and create and deliver products and services in the industry, then we need different types of people. And this is where I think the challenge for the credit unions is. We don't need somebody sitting behind a desk, you know, smiling and saying, "Hi, Andrew, how you doing today?" You know, when Andrew, the member, walks in the door. You know, it's really more technologist type people versus client-facing or member-facing people. And I can only imagine, well, maybe in Washington, you've got, you know, good talent pool up there where you are, but not if you're in the rural area. But yeah, I think for the challenge for just a lot of credit unions is that they don't have the talent pool to draw from on the technology side to, you know, kind of change out the skill sets that they've got. And, you know, to some extent, I you know, can't help but wonder if there's a lot of credit union executives who, you know, are resisting that reality, or thinking that there's different ways to kind of get that. But, you know, we talk a lot in the past 30 years about, you know, outsourcing IT. I don't think it's about, you know, a big bang outsource it or not. It's about being able to source very specific skills for very specific points in time to create certain capabilities and bring the management and maintenance of that capability in-house or keep it out of house, whatever it might be, but it's not, you know, big bang. And I think this is where the skills challenge comes into play, is that, you know, reality isn't maybe that we need less people, but we need different types of skill sets in the people we've got.
Do you think that the work from home is maybe a great equalizer from that? Because, you know, and you knew our institute, you know, you knew WRG when I was there, and Kevin and I ran that. And one of the things we always said is, we don't care if you live in the back of a caboose as long as you have good internet connection. We just want the best person. And now that Crayons have opened up to this work from home, is that an opportunity to find that talent outside the geographic regions that they're in?
Yes, but with maybe a caveat. So, you know, one of the things I think the work from home thing has done, yeah, it makes it easier to find that talent. But what I think it's finally done is shaken the, you know, the old line executives' way of thinking that we all have to be in this building together. We need to, you know, I've always thought that while, you know, a lot of people were saying, yeah, a lot of people are going to have a tough time adjusting to working from home. I thought the people who were going to have the biggest problem were the managers, not the line workers. It's the, you know, what are my people doing? I'm supposed to be keeping on top of them kind of thing. We all need to be here. You know, we need to, now, you know, I've got kids who are in their 20s and now early 30s, and, you know, they've seen dad
and a new grandfather. Congratulations.
I'm a grandfather, man. This is actually very cool. I know, you can't believe it. Look at this guy's, I know.
He's so young. How can he possibly be a grandfather?
You know, they've seen dad here working from home for 8 years now. But, you know, my lesson is that to them was like, no, you don't work from home from now. You get your butt into that office and you get, you know, you develop relationships and you show and you do that thing. Well, now they don't even have that option to do that anymore. So yes, the work from home kind of helps, you know, break that barrier of, gee, we're in rural Washington and where are we going to find somebody? Because now we can find them pretty much anywhere. But the bigger problem is that, you know, I've been thinking about this recently. It's like, I think banks and credit unions in the past 10 years have missed this huge opportunity of hiring a lot of smart young people who've now all gone to fintech companies. They look at it and think it's like, well, this is, so cool. I'm transforming the industry. And the reality is that, nah, they haven't really transformed the industry. They could be having so much more of an impact on more people working for a bank or a credit union than they could some piddly little fintech company, bragging that they have 500,000 customers when all they really have is 500,000 downloads of their app. You know what I mean? And I'm picking on somebody particular who put out a press release today and claimed that.
I'm sorry, Brian.
So, yeah, well, Brian's a good example of hiring all the skills and talent that could have been working at a credit union. And so, the work from home thing, John, I think does crack open that opportunity, but I don't think it really makes it that much easier to find the right people until the credit unions, they've struggled this for so long to tell their story. The fintechs still have a sexier story to tell than now the credit unions do.
So that was where I wanted to go next, and I want to open it up for questions from folks. But and we may or may not get to Google checking. But so Kevin and I were working on a presentation, and the thing that we kind of came to was most everybody on this call has what I would call reasonably good, if not good, tech. There's nobody on here who doesn't have RDC implemented. You know what I'm saying? And we both know of organizations that don't even have that yet. And so we're in, I think, a pretty good space. So step one, good tech. Okay. Step two, intentions. There's no one better than the credit union industry when it comes to taking care of their members and service. There's no one that cares more. I truly believe that. And having, I'm biased. I've been in the industry a long time, but that's what I feel. So what's missing? Why are we not, especially in this moment, succeeding? And even you mentioned 2000, 2008, and Kevin, I'll throw this at you to add a little onto that, because I think you were the one that really put that there. But go ahead, Kevin, maybe pick it up from that spot.
Yeah, I think.
Well, introduce yourself. I don't know that Ron knows you.
I'm Kevin Sarber. I work with John at Best Innovation Group, and I worked with John for many years at Westcom, and I survived.
He's still here. Look at all that hair. He's older than you, Ron.
So, as John said, really, we understand that online banking and mobile are table stakes to be in, and as John said, it's kind of, there's little differences, but overall the products all kind of do the same thing. So that's the piece, but and we're getting members to move in that direction, but even some of those members who log in every day will still go into the branch, and oftentimes when you ask them why, it's because they wanted to see Susie, and I get to see Susie every week if I come in and deposit my check. And so how do we, continue to move members in that direction? And what's missing from the other things like PFM and some of the, the things that we tried 12 years ago and rolled out the first PFM and just couldn't get anybody to sustain use of the product. So long-winded, but that's my question.
No, not long-winded at all. And I think, you're hitting on two good points. One of them, I'll kind of go back to my comment about technology like this for reaching people. If you go back, I guess, 30, 40 years at this point, nobody raised their hand and said, I want to pump my own gas. I want to get out of my car when it's 0 degrees out or raining or snowing, and I want to pump my own gas. The gas industry forced that on us, and we were forced to accept it. What happened over time was technology got better. We could pay at the pump. We could use a flash thing and get past. Now, it still didn't, take care of getting out of the car, at least. And now, you go to certain ones and there's little videos you can watch while you're doing it. So it's not a perfect experience. But look, reality is that you have to adapt to this. Now, if there are members who still want to see Susie, my point is make Susie available in other mechanisms other than in the branch. If she can more effectively reach a whole lot of people through video like this, than she's ever, waiting for people to come in once a week to do it. So that's number one. Your other question or comment was about PFM. And so here you go, John, you write this one down, because this is another area where, I was wrong 15 years ago when, I, like a bunch of other analysts, were saying PFM is going to change the world and become blah, 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 blah. And it never happened and it didn't work. And part of the reason, I think, was because of a couple things. Number one, PFM really never evolved much more beyond budgeting capabilities and maybe some expense categorization. And reality is that a lot of people don't actually need to budget, and those who do, don't. And the tools didn't engender the behavioral change that was needed. What I've really come to conclude, though, is that the biggest failure of a lot of PFM stuff was that it was backwards looking. And what I would come to the conclusion of is that throwing more information at people does not necessarily get them to change their behavior. And fundamentally, the reason PFM would have been successful was if it had changed people's behavior, but it didn't. And so the new PFM, if you want to call it that, are really the action-oriented things. It's the tools like, Digit that automate the savings. They just go do it for you. Or, oh shoot, I'm blanking out on the name of the company that does like the bill tracker, and it analyzes the bills and goes and, negotiates, the better, somebody was, I got to go back to Twitter. Somebody was commenting on that yesterday, which made me think about it. But, it's the tools that do things, that automate the action versus just simply go, here's more information. Now, some of that information is helpful at the point of sale. So the real-time contextual stuff. But, look, if you're really not going to get somebody to stop making a transaction when they want to make a transaction, because if they want something, they want it. And you're going to be the person to say, gee, Tom, do you really need that fourth six-pack of beer this week? You're over your beer limit budget. You're like, yeah, screw you. I'm buying this beer. You're still going to do it. So, that's why PFM has kind of failed. But the tools that take action, and there are tools that are kind of emerging that are, doing gamification things to try to change behavior. But I think the ones that will really win are the ones that just kind of do it. And it's interesting, I conducted this, a consumer survey at the beginning of July. So kind of, after the bottom of the dip from the COVID crisis, and asked consumers about, a lot of things around their financial lives. And the percentage of millennials and Gen Xers who use Robinhood, Betterment, Acorns, Digit, these tools, they're 40% of millennials are using it, 30% of Gen Xers, and they're using a lot of these tools to kind of do that. And this is where I think, because it's not necessarily, you're not seeing the money coming out of your accounts and the credit unions. I think a lot of credit unions are blind to that behavior among their members.
I would agree with that. I think that the other reason, my belief on why PFM failed was introduction of MFA, which complicated it right at its part of its trajectory, made it harder to get connected to, and then in general clunky connections. Whereas I think we're starting to see in Europe after the payment services rule, PSD 2.0, I think, allowing that interaction to get that data, it's starting to pick up a little bit there. But I 100% agree on being proactive as opposed to reactive. It's the whole, I think there's a banking commercial where some guy comes in and they go, he's going to rob, and he just pulls the alarm and he goes, well, do something. And he goes, I pulled the alarm. That's what I do. That's not helpful. Yeah, I got an NSF. What I need to know is before I get the NSF. And that certainly is the expectation of the next generation. They certainly have not been taught those sort of finances in school. So let me ask you this as I shift this subject. So what is your advice what do you see, you've been doing this forever, you and Jim and Brett, everybody's dug so deeply into what's happening right now. If you were in the driver's seat and you were looking at the future here, what do you know, and I know it's different strokes, so try to be maybe a little more broad. I get it that like rural places may want to keep branches open. I understand all those things. But to the extent of big rocks to move, what do you see happening here if you're in that seat? What would you focus on? And that you're still, I don't know, greatest generation senior executive, World War II vet. Go with that.
Yeah,
Like Tom.
I will tell you that I think reality for credit unions, and even though, yes, different strokes for different folks, I think the reality is, if you look at what's happening in the millennial market in particular, Gen Z, I think, is a little too early to kind of claim this, but among millennials, 3 banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and JP Morgan Chase have 45% market share. 3 banks. And I would argue that they actually have better mobile banking tools than the vast majority. And there's an apathy. I'll just go with whoever's easier. And look, they've got it. So I think the reality, John, is that for credit unions, you said it before, the technology is good enough, but you can't keep up with the Bank of America's, JP Morgan Chases, and Wells of the world. They simply have way too much money to spend on these types of technologies and tools. And so you're not going to compete on user experience or member experience unless we're talking about a certain segment of members who have unique banking, needs that the big guys are going to overlook. And so let me give you like a real example of this, because I think, there's one organization I think really, even though they don't describe this as their approach, I think it's how they operate, is USAA. And it's about the bullseye. And in the center of the USAA bullseye is the active deployed military member. And they define and design everything about their operations around that segment, even though that's not necessarily the biggest segment of their member base. But reality is that in the next ring of the bullseye is the active non-deployed military member. And if USAA can serve the needs of the active deployed military member very well, then they're probably meeting 99% of the needs of the active non-deployed military members. And if so, then they're meeting a lot of the needs of the inactive former military members and meeting a lot of the needs of family of military members in that outer ring of the circle. And so to me, for smaller institutions, it's about segmentation and picking the market. I think there are going to be, just as there is in the community bank world, I think there's going to be a lot of challenges for credit unions. Interestingly, what have we seen over the past 20 years was this move to the community charter. I think that's going to turn out to be a hindrance, not a help, because it isn't about geography anymore.
Right.
That's what's happening now with all
People
the
can move,
fintechs is
yeah.
they're able to go national. They cherry pick. They pick out a few people here. They pick out a few people there, and they're chipping away at the market. So for the credit union, where to start with this, John, is really redefining the bullseye. Who's in the middle of that bullseye that we're serving, even if it's not the biggest segment of our market. But reality is if you're serving those people well, you're probably attracting and serving the next ring out there. And defining those rings of the bullseye is kind of where I would start. And recognizing that, it isn't about shifting, like Tom did, the branch, that's a great way to start, but it's still about defining products and services that meet certain niches and figuring out, okay, well, we still need branches to serve those people. That's well and fine. But maybe it's not about the branch that's needed. It's, look, we need people, to serve these people in wherever they may be with these sort of needs. It's about a skill capability, not a channel delivery.
So let me paraphrase, and I have a good question from Cody back to you being wrong about PFM, which everybody's so interested in. They also want to know the time and date. I think I was with you when you said it at least once. So the first thing is, don't try to out Bank of America, Bank of America. I think that's what I heard you say. And the reality is we can't. One thing I'll tack on to that I still believe is the superpower of the credit union industry is collaboration. I do not believe that we have harnessed that to the level that it could be harnessed. And if it were to ever happen, we would be the fourth thing on that list, you know, and probably move up to second or third pretty quickly. I truly believe that. That is the most overlooked. I mean, just look at this. You know, would you ever have a banking session like this where people are willing to get on every week and talk about what they're going through and share it? It'd be hard to do. But here we have that opportunity. So that's the first one. The second one, and this is interesting to me, because in the 90s, we all started, you know, we wouldn't be boat builders credit union anymore. We're going to be Fax Min My Tech, or, you know, Tom, not to pick on you, but what was your credit union's original name before it was Aspire?
FAA, Eastern Region Employees Federal Credit Union.
So, but let's take that for a minute. Again, Tom, you know I love you. I do this, but
Yeah,
the FAA is a very easy bullseye to hit, right? Like to his point, the Deere. I have a friend who runs Deere Credit Union, and the only people they serve are the Deere employees, John Deere employees. Those guys are another easy bullet.
No,
you know.
John, they're not easy because there are not necessarily unique needs of people who work at Deere. In Tom's case, it's unique needs of some segment of the FAA employee base. And then the challenge is, okay, we can serve those needs. Yeah, they gotta have it somewhere. It's like take a teacher's credit union. Teachers have more unique needs around their managing their finances than general consumers do. But instead of being the Spokane Teachers Credit Union, you now got to say, well, how do I take this beyond my Spokane limited geography and serve teachers
drag out
anywhere?
That bullseye. But we're not even good at the current bullseye because we tried to swim in the ocean. That's, I guess, where I'm saying.
Oh, John, most credit unions try to be all things to all people. So you're not going to be really good at anything for anybody. And that's one of the things when we did this conversion, if you will, to the digital focus, our board understood and they were okay that we're going to lose some members. We're going to lose people that don't want to have their business delivered this way. If they insist on going into a branch, they want to see Susie at that branch. Sorry, that's not us. We can't afford to serve members that way. And as we retrained members, as we implemented the services, actually most came along for the ride. And the ones that we did serve knew we were making very happy because we focused, like the USAA, you focused on that bullseye, and other people are just not going to be in that pool. But until credit unions decide, this is my niche and this is who I want to serve, they're going to be just okay in a lot of areas instead of focusing to become really great in a few.
Tom, I think a lot of people in your shoes, in your role, don't get something that you really commented on. There was that, the losing of members. Oh, they want to see Susie every week. Look, people recognize the grass is not greener on the other side. They chose a credit union because they were getting lousy service from the other banks. And so the fact that you took one thing away from them, nobody wants anything taken away from them. But is that a big enough change to get them to change? Yeah, some, yes. The majority, I'd be willing to bet no. That is not enough to get them to bail on you.
So just going back, because I want to finish my point about the Deere, they actually turned out to be a very good target. They were, because the executives had to travel a certain amount of time. They were forced to. There were things we could find about them that we could create some services around that made life a little better for them. And school teachers was the great, perfect example. That's why I am in a credit union, because I was a school teacher. And when I signed up, I've told this story before, but there were two amounts that I could get paid on my my application, a bigger one and a smaller one. I chose the bigger one. Turned out that meant I didn't get paid over summer or Christmas. And if it weren't for the credit union having a summer skips program, which at the time, I don't know of any banks that had summer skips for teachers, if you could prove that you were a Hillsborough County school teacher. So your point, I think we're together on that. We really are. I want to jump to Cody's question here. So Cody is with, they've got a new name now. Now I can't remember. He'll pop it up here in a minute, but longtime friend. Sherpa Technologies now. Thank you. I always have your main corporate in my corporate one. So is there a study that outlines the use of PFM and the positive effects of financial health on members? For example, he says M-Pesa wallet has reduced the poverty levels by 2% in Kenya since the launch in 2007. Do you think there's anything out there like that, Ron? Anything you've seen or come across?
I think the M-Pesa example is interesting, but hardly, I think, analogous to what the U.S. situation is. I think I think there are some tools that can help. From an enforcing behavior type perspective, but other than some of the automated savings things and some of these bill analysis type tools, I don't know, I'm kind of hard pressed to think of ones that I think are going to have an impact on, a broad swath of consumers. I'm probably missing something here.
Yeah, I think that until they become proactive, like you said, and we're seeing that in the cities, we're seeing that in the Chases, we're seeing that in the bigger banks where they're now starting to put these governors in and things like that. So could we take the last 5 minutes about Google checking and just give us the update there? It's fascinating.
Yeah, so what I'd love to do is tell you all about what it is, but I can't because nobody knows what it is.
I know, I was hoping you knew. I tried to look it up and I couldn't figure it out either.
So, when they first announced this in November, there were absolutely no details. And then recently they announced 6 new partners. And I reached out and talked with 4 of the 6. And these were all people I knew. So I knew that, I was going to, wasn't talking to corporate communications or anything like that. Well, 2 out of the 4 referred me right off to corporate communications. So I knew I wasn't going to get any answers. And all 4 of them responded, and it was as if they were reading from a script. I asked them very specifically, I said, have you seen the Google checking account? If you have, what is it, what about it is superior to what's offered today? And if you haven't seen it, what is Google telling you it will have that's better than what's out there today? All 4 responses I got were basically, at this time, we can't share any details, blah, 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 blah. But, one says, but given Google's presence in the market, we are confident they will deliver something great. Others said, well, we are working with them to create great user experience. Another, at this time, we can't share anything. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you can't share anything because you don't know anything about it. And so what really astounds me, John, is that how all of you guys have gone through, system selection projects where you sit through demo after demo. It takes all day. You ask all these questions, but now you're willing to go sight unseen with a vendor because their name is Google and sign up with them for, it's just mind boggling. And I'm not even sure what it buys the institution, to some extent, I think they just sort of want the, I called it the whiff of innovation that comes from sitting in the chair next to Google.
Was Stanford Praying one of the ones you called?
Yeah, but that one I can, that.
I mean, it is Google's alma mater. I get it.
Well, there are a lot of Google employees who are members of Stanford Federal Credit Union, so it makes sense. Now, the other credit union that signed up was employees, CEFCU in New York. Up in Albany. So, definitely probably not a lot of Google employees in that. And they were not one of the ones who responded to me. So I did not get to hear the story from them. So, it's interesting. There's positives and negatives to this. Reality is that this is not an account that that's going to replace your existing account. It's going to be basically built into Google Pay. And so who is it that, I did, the consumer research I did, I asked consumers how interested would you be in a Google checking account. This was even before the most recent announcement. And the people who are most likely to, open up a Google checking account are those people who already use Google Pay. So, it's kind of get built in there. So it kind of begs the question, John, what is it the credit union who partners with Google on this really getting? To me, it feels very much like a banking as a service type of offering where you're nothing more than the back end to this. And sure,
I was going to say, isn't it just indirect checking?
Oh, yeah, it's hard. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it feels like, you may make some money off the deal, but, this is hard.
You're not going to have a relationship with them because you might just be, because they don't want to be a bank. They don't want to be, so to the extent that, but crayons would be more difficult. I mean, when we've looked into this traditionally and looked into it for indirect auto lending, it's not trivial to connect all the people with all the different things. And so I wonder if Google really even knows what they're getting into in that regard.
Well, I give them the credit that they do, but what's still very murky to me is well, first of all, it's not clear to me like why they needed more than one partner for this. And if they have more than one partner, so let's say you're Aspire Credit Union and you've got a certain charter, you're only basically going to be able to get new members who are fit in that charter. So, okay, are you really doing that poor a job of, working your market? I don't know. It's not like there's this great expansion opportunity necessarily. So I don't know, John,
Do you think there's another shoe to drop? Like they're going to announce, I don't know, some partnership with, I don't know, pick your big Santander, pick your big bank, and suddenly, yeah, these other ones were kind of out there, but this is the game, and we're going to start.
Well, my speculation has been that Google wants to be a technology vendor. And look at what's happened. They're already offering these AI-based tools to help you do PPP processing. Of course, they're making a big pitch and push with the Google Cloud offerings. They're getting some good traction in Europe with some big banks in Europe, less so in the US, but I think they can start telling that story better. And I think they see a US-based bank and credit union market with huge, huge levels of dissatisfaction with the existing vendor base. And they're thinking, we can capitalize on this, and we've got something that the FISs, Fiservs, and Jack Henrys of the world can't offer, and that's access to the consumer side of the coin.
650 million people. Yeah.
It's unlimited, the number of people. And they can truly revolutionize the whole banking experience by integrating banking into search, banking into the Google Chrome browser, into the Google Pay app. I mean, they can revolutionize the banking experience much better than Jack Henry, FIS, and Fiserv are going to be able to. To me, that's who ought to be worried about Google's move into banking. It's not the banks and the credit unions.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. Well, listen, I really can't thank you enough for taking the time, Ron. This was fascinating and awesome. And we will get this posted for everyone that's here. Kevin just posted the link to the Who Wants Google to Be Their Bank Snarkington Shark Tank Forbes article, which I highly recommend. It was we did a podcast on this, Glenn and I, not some time ago. And one of the things I asked him was, I said, okay, take Google out in front and put any other vendor in. Let's try it. And we did Taco Bell Bank or Taco Bell Checking. I don't know, Home Depot Checking. I mean, when you put other vendor names in front of it, it's fascinating to think of it that way.
I got the data for you, John. I asked in the survey I said, would you bank with Kardashians? Would you bank with TikTok?
Yes, exactly. What are these? It's brand, it's that brand piece. And if you put it in front of checking, what does that mean? And it was fascinating to me because I just made him, we did a little back and forth, trying to come up with different brands to throw in front of the word checking. And it was, and I will tell you, I love my son. He works for our company. And if he thought he could get a car loan through the McDonald's drive-through and it was easier than somewhere else, he'd do it. And he wouldn't care that it came from McDonald's. And so, that's something we have to consider, that this idea of a financial institution, and I've heard you speak on this. I don't want to get us too far down this. Will you come back sometime and talk to us again? Because I can
Happy to, man. This is great. I love this.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And thank you to all my folks, especially guys like Tom, who put themselves out there and let me pick on him and also really bring good points. And I think you guys know each other because I think you and I both spoke at one of their offsite events. And Kevin for bringing that up, and Brian Lay for wearing his hat. So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Take care. Thanks, Ron.